oh, I just gotta wear these gloves. Can't leave fingerprints, that's how they're gonna catch me. And if you were a criminal in the 1700s, you'd be like, better not stand here at this crime scene so they don't catch me. So it's like crime detection has changed over the centuries, basically. First they did blood typing. They'd find the blood and they'd be like, this guy has A negative blood. Round up everyone who has A negative blood. And then it became fingerprints. Well, maybe the fingerprints came first, actually. But, I mean, they had these progression of techniques. And it's this arms race where the criminals commit crimes and they don't ever really know. When you commit the crime, you're doing it on the basis of the evidence-gathering techniques they have then. You don't know what's coming down the pipe. You're a serial killer back in the 80s. You're not really thinking about DNA. In 1983, there was an armed robbery. Okay, and actually, here, let me back up again. I know that was an exciting beginning. I think this story takes place in Britain, because these articles, again, are from 2004. The reason why I think it takes place in Britain, because they refer to an armored car as a caravan company, whatever that is. I'm assuming it's an armored car. And the reason why I'm assuming that is because it had 38,000 pounds in it. So that's like, I don't know, $30,000. But anyways, back to our action scene. Shooting out with this caravan. I just think of like Lawrence of Arabia, but give me the gold, give me the gold. Put it all in there. Apparently leprechaun, they're stealing from leprechauns. But so these criminals, they rob this caravan in 1983. And they get away with 38,000 pounds. And the dude's running away, and at one point he takes off, he had a stocking, which, you know, like a pantyhose over his face to disguise his face. Again, it's 1983, they weren't really thinking that much. Put pantyhose over his face to disguise it, and at one point he pulls the pantyhose off of his face. He probably left the ones on his legs still, but he pulled the pantyhose off of his face and kept running. Now we're in the year 2004, which is where my new news folder comes from, and the detectives, I can imagine a single detective has been staring at this piece of pantyhose for the past 20 years, but he's looking at it and he goes, dude, this thing's full of dandruff. Let's see if we can get some DNA. And they did. The guy had, I guess, bad dandruff, enough dandruff that's noticeable, and they pulled some of the dandruff off, which is, you know, skin flakes, so it would have DNA in it. They tested it. 20 years later, he got arrested for this crime. For this bank robbery, and you know that at that point he's probably like, I've already spent the money, and he was doing whatever else, and he's sitting there, and he's like, man, I really should have bought some Head and Shoulders. That thing popped in his head for a second. I really should have bought some dandruff shampoo, but I didn't. Army guys, or probably more likely police, break into his house and arrest him. Convicted because he had dandruff. So he never could have predicted that. If he did, he probably should have worn two pantyhoses, one to keep all of his dandruff in, and the other one to disguise his face. Or simply don't take your mask off until you get home. That's another pro tip. Interestingly enough, this happened in 2004. He got sentenced to 15 years in prison, so you know what that means. He gets free next year. That's a great thing about doing news from decades ago, because it seems oddly relevant sometimes. Okay, next, new news. Very short one. I just thought this one was adorable. 2004, if you could have guessed. There was this family in Russia, and they're like, you know what we should do? Let's go on a vacation. The family's like, yay, where are we going? And they're like, Siberia? So, for whatever reason, they go to Siberia to visit. What is there? It's huts and caribou and a giant impact crater from an airburst meteorite, and gulags. Siberia. If you lived here, you'd already be at home. Like, who wants to go there? Anyways, they vacation to Siberia. They go sit at the side of a frozen lake. It's a wasteland. But anyways, so they're in Siberia. Maybe they like skiing. I guess it's probably good for skiing. I imagine it's flat, though. I always imagined Siberia was just a continent-wide plain. Are there mountains over there? I don't know. Anyways, this family from Russia decides to go further east. They go to Siberia, and they bring their little cat. They bring Kuzya. Hey, Kuzya. Meow. Let's go on this vacation to this horrid wasteland that we used to send political prisoners to. Meow. So they're there, and it sucked. The people were fine with it. They stayed there for about 3 weeks. But Kuzya was like, I'm out, dude. This place totally blows. It's like super cold, and it's dry. and I'm pretty sure there's a house made out of toothpaste over there. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. But they just heard him go, meow, and he like jumped off their lap and he ran away. So they looked for him for the 3 weeks. They're like, Kuzya, and he didn't come, and they're like all sad. They're like, well, that sucks. I mean, again, lesson learned, don't go to Siberia for your vacation, but eventually their time ended and they had to go home. They were like, well, our vacation's over. We have to go back home to the West Russia. So they leave, and they leave little Kuzya there. 3 months later, after they leave, they hear meow, meow at their door, and they're like, what? Did you buy a new cat? No, I'm still getting over Kuzya disappearing in the wilderness. Meow. They open the door, it's Kuzya. Kuzya walked 1,300 miles across Siberia to get back home. That's how much he hated Siberia. He could have just been like, I'm just gonna lay here, or I'll build a new home here, or meet like a nice, cute cat woman. No, he's like, screw this, I'm going home. Walks through Siberia. When they get him, they notice that he had lost weight. His claws were basically turned to little nubs, like they had been completely filed down. He had meat, animal meat in his teeth, supposedly animal meat. I don't think they took it to the DNA lab, but the article said, he had like flesh in his teeth, and he had a couple bite marks on him. But other than that, he was totally fine. Little Kuzya. Meow. Imagine hating someplace that much that you would walk 1,300 miles to get out of it. I don't even think I would do that. I'd probably walk 10 and be like, you know what? Maybe I can start a new life here. I'd probably walk 2 and do that. Sad ending to the story, though. The story is from 2004, so little Kuzya most likely has passed away by now. But if you're in heaven, Kuzya, I hope it's warm and sunny and as opposite of Siberia as you can get. Meow. That was an EVP. Kuzya is contacting us from beyond the grave. Okay. The next story I want to talk about, I was going to talk about yesterday, but I ran out of time. And I think it's an interesting story because it kind of hinges on that conflict between religion and science. Now, the conflict's been going on since the first nerd picked up a textbook. We're going to look at the life and times of a man named Thomas Dick. Now, I will say this, I found out about this guy because I was prepping another story, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, a Christian philosopher / scientist. And I was like, oh, I'm going to look into this guy. I'm kind of scrolling through my phone, looking at it at work, and then I just started laughing. First off, let's address his last name. Now, I am not so immature that when I see a guy with the last name of Dick, I immediately think of penises. I saw his name, I'm like, Thomas Dick, it didn't even occur to me. I'm like, oh, I started reading the article, and it's like, it was on Wikipedia, it was like, Thomas Dick was born in this is the year, and he was doing this. And then it said, he worked at his father's linen shop. His father made, wove clothes or something like that. I guess I should preface this. This starts off in the 1700s. This is mostly late 1700s, early 1800s. It's like the father, he had this linen shop where he made clothes. His father's name, this great Christian philosopher, would go on to be this author, this influential author. His father's name is Mungo Dick. Mungo Dick. And I laughed out loud when I saw that. Now, that's when I was like, okay, let's break down Mungo Dick here for a second. One, it makes it sound like he has a huge dick. If you go, dude, that's a Mungo Dick, you don't think, oh, that must be a Scottish name. You're like, no, that means the dude has a big dick. Now, to be fair, when these guys were around in the late early 1800s, dick didn't mean penis yet, but it does now. So when I'm reading an article and there's a guy named Mungo Dick in it, I'm gonna laugh out loud. Secondly, and again, I know that Mungo is... Oh, and by the way, Mungo means beloved in Scottish. So basically his name is Beloved Dick. But I get that Mungo is a Scottish name, and it's probably a little racist for me to make fun of it, but when I think of Mungo, I think of a 8-foot-tall, brute, Gollum-esque, not Gollum from Lord of the Rings, but big stone dude, Solomon Grundy dude. That's who you think of. You think of a henchman. You think of a... Imagine growing up in a house with a guy named Mungo. Again, you guys are like, Jason, this is... So I'm trying to read this article now, after having this vision of this lurching henchman just standing behind this young boy, and I just couldn't focus anymore. So Thomas Dick was, I just imagine this giant, like, Mungo no like science. Mungo like God. And then Thomas Dick's like, but Dad, you have to understand, God made science. And Mungo's like, whoa, head hurt. And I imagine that was pretty much his childhood life. And you go, well, that might be an exaggeration, but it's not really, because he wanted to be a scientist because he saw a meteor one day. And so he's reading all the books he could, even when he was in the linen shop. Mungo's like crashing through the shop, throwing books around. Make yarn! And so, anyways, so Thomas Dick, because he had no support from his parents early on, he actually made his own telescope. He got like some eyeglasses and ground down the lenses. I think that story's probably a bit apocryphal. I don't think that story actually happened. But it would be awesome if it did, just to give something for Mungo to destroy. He's like, no, I think. She's like, Dad, no, I worked on that. Only see with real God eyes. Anyways, by the time he was 16, his parents kind of started to warm up to the end. Because I guess I should have said this before Mungo destroyed the shop. They were Christian. They were like, not like super crazy Westboro Baptist Church Christian, but they were devout. So when their son was like, oh, look at shiny stars. Maybe that's like a rock from another galaxy. Mungo's like smashing through the wall. So anyways, but by the time they're 16, they're like, science may be okay. And then Thomas is like, yay. Anyways, so he starts to like really get into the science stuff. Now he becomes a teacher, he becomes a writer, and he starts writing articles for a magazine. And I thought this was another just bizarre, you have a magazine. I'm reading this article and I'm thinking, who wrote this? Mad Libs on a bored afternoon? We got Mungo Dick running around, and he writes for a magazine called Monthly Magazine. That is the most... I thought about it afterwards, and I thought, yes, there are newspapers called, like, the Daily Star or the Daily Tribune, but I don't know if I've ever seen a newspaper called Daily Paper. That's just it. But anyways, he wrote for a magazine that came out every month called Monthly Magazine. It should have been, actually, now that I think about it, it should have been Mungo's Monthly Magazine. That would have been much better. That would be a better plot. Mungo actually has a monthly magazine, not a linen shop. I'm glad I'm rewriting this guy's life history. And it is a magazine dedicated to religious topics and sports. And Mungo's like, me put religion in for soul, but sports is what makes me feel alive. And it's all like rugby stuff because they're in Europe. And the son's trying to, like, sneak in science articles. And so as Mungo's, like, proofreading, he has his little glasses on his giant monster head. As he's trying to proofread the magazine, he notices, like, in the sports article, because the sports articles would say stuff like, ball smash through goal, team win. And then he starts to notice, like, equations sneaking in there, like, the ball arced 90 degrees. Oh, and then Mungo's just like smashing the printing press. Son, what you do? Where these numbers come from? Okay, let's get back to the real story here. So, Thomas Dick ends up writing these books, and he writes a bunch of books about Christian philosophy. One of them, his big book was The Christian Philosopher, or The Connection of Science and Philosophy with Religion. And that was a huge book, and it was about him trying to merge the two ideas together. And from then on out, he was known as the Christian philosopher. And he was highly regarded as like a well-thought-out guy who actually did a good blend of science and religion. But where he started to go wrong, because that's all just thought experiments, where I could say, here's science, here's religion, and these are the ways we can look at them. What started to go wrong, other than Mungo then smashing through the city of London, that was actually a big incident. They had to take Mungo down because he was attacking a bunch of bobbies. So, but the big problem he made was that he started to basically formulate scientific theories himself. And he was a smart guy. And people have looked back and said, it's interesting because he used data. He actually, he thought like a scientist. But his conclusions were wildly off. And he came to this calculation that there's 250 people per square mile in Britain. And there's millions and millions of square miles in the solar system. God would not create an empty universe.